Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all and welcome to the channel. This is a rather odd video, at least for me personally, because I am diversifying. This video, even though it is a tutorial, it is not a scientific tutorial. It will appeal more to those who enjoy role-playing or gaming in general, but more specifically role-playing and precisely speaking, tabletop role-playing. I have my reasons for starting this tutorial series or this playlist. One of them being that it was a promise I made to a friend, a dear friend and brother to me who no longer exists. So I am fulfilling that purpose, but I do have other people who also asked if I could create videos for this game, which is basically Dungeons and Dragons, if you could not infer from the character sheet I have in front of me. So this playlist will cover how to create a character, but it will also cover gameplay mechanics. For example, when we discuss the statistics, which is the topic of the day today, we will then discuss difficulty classes, because that is how that is the influence that the statistical scores enforce regarding difficulty classes. So we will discuss the character creation, but we will also discuss mechanics associated with the character creation. That way, when you create your own character, you are also aware of the functionalities of each aspect of the character sheet. In front of me here, I have a rather amazing character sheet. In my opinion, it is highly interactive. I do not know who made it, to be quite honest. I found it online. I do not even remember how I found it, because I had this probably since 2 years, 3 years, I honestly do not recall. I will leave it in the description below, a link to download it in the description below. I will also leave a link to different Dungeons and Dragons books, including the player's handbook. That way you save your money, you do not have to purchase any of these unnecessarily overly priced books. At least from my perspective, they are incredibly unnecessary, mainly because my world and my campaign is of my own creation, so I do not use anything related to the lore of Dungeons and Dragons, because for me personally, Dungeons and Dragons is a stupid game. In terms of lore, it is heavily convoluted, and in terms of mechanics, it is incredibly unbalanced, which is why I designed my own tabletop role-playing game. But as I mentioned, I am not doing this because I love Dungeons and Dragons. I am doing this for reasons of my own. Now, I will not be using this character sheet, though you can follow along with me using this sheet. I will actually be using a different program that is designed to create a character sheet rather intuitively and easily. That way, when I use this program, for example, I do not have to keep opening the player book for all the necessary adjustments. The program does it for me automatically. So I will be using this program. Feel free to follow along with me while looking at the character sheet here. And this is the scripted one. I will also leave a link for the unscripted one, the one that does not have any programming involved, the traditional one, just in case you find these pop-ups or focus traversables annoying. Some people do. However, before I begin, and if you're wondering why this sheet does not contain a spells tab, that is done intentionally for religious purposes, because magic is forbidden in Islam, though I am contemplating if I should, what is the word for it? Record videos for the spells in the game, because this is a game after all, though the spells are incredibly stupid in my opinion, but I am still contemplating that. We will see what happens. Now, Before I start tackling this lecture, I am accustomed to lecturing. Before I start this tutorial, I have a list of dedications, or I guess you could say acknowledgements, not necessarily acknowledgements, but dedications from my friend. He had me promise that if I ever did record these videos, I will mention these acknowledgements. So these are pseudonyms, of course, not actual names, and in alphabetical order. Anna was here, Booklover, Cam Harkness, Celeste Crawford, Dreamystar, Fangirl, yep, that's me. Man, who comes up with these stupid names? Anyways, also known as Mars or Aries, Golly G Jones, Jenny, also known as Megan or Tara, Max and Eabis, I mentioned them together because they are a couple, Nanase, Narudenoka, Patrick, Speedynate, VitalAbyss, and Wolfie. And I actually have acknowledgements of my own that I would like to mention. NeverLeo, PoRaptor, Sunbear, Vespirio Fox, and Willow. Now that the list is no longer needed, I will put it aside. Okay, so we will begin with the... what is the word? With the central and essential element of character creation, which include the statistical scores. There are 6 statistics. Each one of them governs or is responsible for a particular element or a particular aspect of the character. And they are strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Strength is responsible for the physical aptitude of the character, and it also governs physical offensive capabilities, but also defensive capabilities. Not necessarily for defending, but for wearing armor. So this basically determines how strong your character is. This is also responsible for carrying, lifting, or pushing heavier objects. The higher the score, the more adept your character will be at doing these activities. Dexterity governs the agility or the nimbleness of the character, which include climbing, jumping, though some people associate jumping with strength. Some people do, some people do not. Walking along tight ropes and so on and so forth, in addition to certain aspects related to thievery, such as pickpocketing. But it is also responsible for ranged attacks, as opposed to strength, which is responsible for melee attacks. Then comes constitution. Constitution is related to the stamina and the endurance of a character. These include fasting, if a character is able to fast longer, like Muslims, for example, they would have a higher constitution. If the character cannot survive without drinking coffee in the morning, then they have low constitution, just as an example. Lung capacity is also governed by constitution. If a person is able to hold their breath underwater for a lengthy period of time, then they have higher constitution. This is also responsible for manipulating, or it governs the health points or hit points of a character. The higher the score, the stronger the character is in terms of hit points, or the more difficult a character is to kill. Then we have intelligence. This is my perspective on the aspect or the element of intelligence. Some people may disagree with me. Intelligence governs knowledge. The more, if a character is knowledgeable, they have higher intelligence. If a character is ignorant, then they have lower intelligence. And this revolves around theoretical knowledge. For example, if a person is adept at algebra, then they would have higher intelligence as opposed to a person who does not know algebra or is not knowledgeable in algebra. This is also responsible for mental fortitude, which is related to mechanics such as mind controlling or charm. The higher the intelligence, the more cognizant the person is, so they are aware or familiar with manipulative techniques. Wisdom, from my perspective, is the practical implementation of the theoretical knowledge from intelligence. For example, a person may know algebra, but they cannot implement it practically in real life. They just know the different formulae for solving algebraic equations, but they cannot implement it in reality. The best example, mathematically speaking, that we can use would be integration as part of calculus. Integration, or the knowledge of integration, would be considered intelligence, but having that knowledge to start construction using that knowledge is considered wisdom. So an engineer would be wise. A student studying calculus would be intelligent but not wise. Why? Because wisdom involves practical experience in life. Lastly, we have charisma, and that revolves around the the appearance of a character, not necessarily the appearance, but also the conveyance of a character, how a character conveys his or herself throughout interactions with other individuals or creatures as well. If you are interested in taming a monster, for example, though this might be considered animal handling, which is wisdom, but we will cover that later. So these are the 6 statistics that are the central and pivotal aspect of creating a character. And we will cover these for today. In the upcoming video, bi'idhnillah and God willing, we will cover DC, or difficulty class, because it is related to this. Then we will move on to the skills, then saving throws, and so on and so forth. So it will be, this process will be stepwise, so I apologize in advance if it seems annoying, but that is how I decided to design the playlist. Now, this is the score for each of these statistics. We also have what is known as a modifier. So this is the score and this is the modifier of this statistic. What is the difference between the score and the modifier? If you are familiar with statistics, or if you have studied statistics, particularly the curve known as the bell curve or the normally distributed curve, like so, you will know that the central and highest portion of the curve is located at the mean. You know what, I will use a text box. Is located at the mean or the average. If, for example, you wish to calculate the average height of students in a particular classroom, then you would measure all the heights of all the students and then divide them by the number of students in the class, and so on and so forth. The reason the highest, the middle point is the highest point indicates that if your data is closer to the mean, that means the measurement was accurate or as precise as it could be. Or it could also mean, pun intended, that everyone in the class has similar heights, which is common. If you are measuring the heights of males, for example, you would see that it would not vary that much, as opposed to the data that you find at the outskirts, sometimes known as outliers, depending on where they are located, and so on and so forth. However, the mean or the average is not sufficient for statistical analyses. It requires another form of measurement, and that is the degree by which the data deviates from the mean. So I will draw a straight line here like so, and I will also do this so that I differentiate it. This is known as the standard deviation, which has its own formula for calculation, of course, but it does rely on the mean. Once the standard deviation of a particular measurement is calculated, then based on an individual measurement, you can say that this measurement is within one standard deviation from the mean, or it could be within 2 standard deviations from the mean, or even 3 standard deviations from the mean, and so on and so forth. What is the purpose for identifying the different segments of standard deviations? Well, ultimately, the purpose of these analyses revolve around what is known as a p-value, or a probability value, for calculating what is known as a statistical significance. For example, if a researcher would like to lie and say alcohol is beneficial for your health, or that sexual orientation is controlled by a gene, which are both false for both researches, and they wish to trick you as a person who is unfamiliar with science or has not experienced the field of research, they would say our studies have shown that alcohol is significantly healthy for the drinker by 95%. That is known as a statistical significance. Or we are 95% certain that this particular gene controls sexual orientation, just as an example. The closer the standard deviation is, the lower the percentage. The larger it is, the higher the percentage. So in this area, with one standard deviation, I believe it was 68%, then 95%, then 99%. So normally what people aim for with respect to percentages, between 95% and 99%. That is what researchers aim for when they are researching a particular hypothesis. If their data is at that level, that is wonderful. That is what they all seek, but most of the time it is roughly here, which is why the p-value is always 100 minus this one, or not 100 minus, but rather 1 minus 0.95 gives you 0.05 or 5%. That is the p-value. The mean, in our case with respect to Dungeons and Dragons, is the score. The modifier is the standard deviation for that particular score. Now, there is a particular calculation for it, to how to calculate the modifier. However, I unfortunately have forgotten. Well, actually, I will pause the recording, check the equation, then come back. Okay, I discovered the equation. So here is the equation to calculate the modifier. But since I am using this program, it will calculate it automatically for me. And the best part about this program, at least from my opinion, is that it is not limited to payments. For example, if you are using websites such as D&D Beyond or Roll20, there are certain restrictions with respect to character creations, where certain elements of a particular race or a particular class are locked behind what is known as a payment wall. So you have to subscribe to unlock everything. In addition, you need to purchase certain books to unlock certain features within those books. This program is designed to circumvent all of that, where all the features are available without any payments at all. This is still in development. It has not been fully finalized yet, considering the grand scope and the multiple races involved and the multiple subclasses as well. It is a grand undertaking, but it is still in development, and that is the true purpose behind that design, is to circumvent the issues with respect to memberships, subscriptions, and payments, so that everything is supplied to the user for free. And of course, with the added convenience of the automation as well. So here is the calculation. It is the statistical score minus 10, which is the mean, the overall mean, as in if a statistical score is 10, that means the person is of average capabilities with respect to the statistic. A strength of 10 means that the person is average. He's not strong, but not weak either, and so on and so forth. Then the difference is divided by 2. And of course, if there are issues with decimals, because this will yield a floating point number. I believe the rule in D&D, feel free to correct me if I am mistaken, you round down, at least for this calculation, and you round up for everything else, if I recall correctly. So calculating the modifier, as you can see here, relies on the statistical score. So how do we calculate the statistical score? There are multiple methods. There's the system known as point buy system, where you start similar to what you see in video games. You start with a total of 27 points, and then you distribute them amongst the different statistical scores as you see fit until you have expended all of the points. Another system is known as the manual array, where there is a standardized set of statistics. I believe they are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, and then you choose which number you assign to which statistic. I could be mistaken, but if you search for it, you will find it. The reason I honestly do not care about these systems is because for when I host campaigns, for example, I have my own approach for statistical scores. So I honestly do not care about these two systems. The third system, which is what people use, is known as the rolling system. And this is the algorithm used to calculate the scores here, unless you wish to do it manually, of course, or if you wish to type it directly as an example. Okay, so let us delete all of this. What does the rolling system entail? Well, quite simply, you roll what is known as a D6, as in a die with 6 sides. And you roll a total of 4 of these. 4 dice. The notation for indicating the number of dice and the sides of each die is written as follows. Let us use this color. So this would be written as 4d6. A die with 6 sides and 4 of them are rolled. If you are rolling only 1, it will be 1d6, and so on and so forth. You probably have seen this notation if you are familiar with the Discord bot known as Avray. I'll write the name if you are interested in reading about it. So for each statistic, so you will do so 6 times. For each statistic, you will roll a 6-sided die 4 times, or you will roll 4 of them simultaneously if you have enough dice. So let us give an example and say these are the numbers that you see. One of them was a 6, the other was a 5, a 1, and lastly a 2. So you have 4 numbers. You remove the lowest number, like so, and then you add the remaining 3 numbers. The sum of this addition, so in this scenario it will be 11, 13. This becomes then statistical score. Now you may ask, how many times should I roll for statistical scores? From my experience, it would depend on your host. I do not use the term Dungeon Master or Game Master for religious reasons, mainly because a master indicates a slave, and we are, as human beings, are all equal. The only time a person can be better than others is through piety. That is the only criterion for segregation. We do not segregate or differentiate based on race or gender. We segregate or differentiate based on piety, because piety is the feat that can be attained by everyone. Everyone cannot be Caucasian and everyone cannot be male, but everyone can be pious if they choose to do so. Most people do not, of course, but that is how we segregate in Islam. We are superior to others because of our piety, not because of our race or our history, and so on and so forth. In addition to that, racism is also forbidden in Islam to begin with, but that is a tale for another time. Anyways, so I do not use the term DM or GM or whatever is there. I simply use the term host. So once you have done this for the first score, you repeat the process 5 more times. So you will do this for a total of 6 times for each score. For this demonstration, I will use these numbers here. 11 for strength. Let us roll again. 14. That is a good number, so I will add it here. And this is automatically calculated. So let us use this equation just to confirm. So we have 14 minus 10. All of this divided by 2. So 14 minus 10 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. You will notice that, so let us undo, the modifier is incremented by 1 every 2 increments of the strength score. For example, if I type in 10 here, for example, and yes, the program is designed to accept ridiculously high scores. It is done by design. It is not an accident. 10 here yields a 0. 11 yields a 0, so that is the first increment. 12, that is the second increment. That is when the modifier is incremented by a single increment. So every 2 increments for the statistical score increments the modifier with a single increment. So I will use 16 here. For dexterity, yeah, I will use the good numbers. Constitution 14, then intelligence 15, then for wisdom 15 as well, and charisma 14. So as you can see, we have selected our statistical scores, and we have also calculated the statistical modifiers. These numbers changed based upon what was placed here, but we will discuss the skills in another video bi'idhnillah and God willing. For now, I just wanted to discuss these 6 statistical scores. Lastly, before we end, and do not worry, we will discuss saving throws later as well, bi'idhnillah and God willing. Lastly, I would like to discuss these numbers. The problem with these numbers revolves around the fact that the creators of Dungeons and Dragons tried to quantify a person, which is impossible. You cannot quantify a person. But Westerners love statistics for whatever reason. I honestly do not know, but they love statistics. Maybe because they use it to lie to their audiences. Maybe. Yeah, could be that. Anyways. So the issue with these statistics is that people think they are indicative of how their character behaves. And that, from my experience and from my perspective, is misleading. For example, let us use this score here. Let us say that the intelligence of a character is 5, for example. Now a person will assume that this means the character is dumb, and so you will see them behaving stupidly during serious circumstances or serious situations, which will ruin the game for everyone. You may think it is humorous, but when it kills your character, believe me, you will not be laughing. Just because the intelligence is low does not mean that the character is dumb. The purpose of these scores, from my perspective and from my experience and from my own judgment, is to yield the modifiers. That is what is most important. What do we need these modifiers for? Well, that is the tale for another time, when we discuss the skills, which will be in the upcoming video bi'idhnillah and God willing, combined with the difficulty class or DC, and then we will end this section with the saving throws. After we are done with that, we will move on to the next step, which is choosing a race. Be forewarned that I am dividing these sections based upon how I tackle character creation. Some people may disagree with me, but I find that to be the most streamlined process. Do not worry about level, speed, size, and proficiency bonus yet. We will come to that later on, bi'idhnillah and God willing. And that is it for this video. I hope this lecture was helpful and beneficial to you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Be safe, take care, and peace be upon you all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.